Yeah, it's fascinating times, like you said, to watch. I mean, to know that the Teamsters might pull for a Republican, never would we have thought that would happen 20, 30 years ago. And yeah, politics is fascinating. It's also crazy, and it'll drive you crazy if you run. Trust me. There was a member of parliament that pulled me aside and he said, Brian, politics is show business for ugly people, is what he told me. And then he laughed. And that was his advice to me. You told me about Trump's crypto adoption curve. I was wondering if you could tell me what you think of Larry Fink of BlackRock's crypto adoption curve. I had Scaramucci in here 6 months ago. And, you know, he always tells this story of bumping into Larry in Davos a couple of years ago. And Larry came up to him and said, you like this Bitcoin thing? He's like, I don't like it. And I think Mooch was like, you know what? You know, I suggest you spend another 10, 20 hours on it and do a deeper dive. Now, the Mooch won't take credit for this, but obviously Larry came full circle. Saylor likes to tweet out and joke that he's the chief marketing officer of Bitcoin, but now they own over 2% of the supply. And I'm curious, what do you think of that? And are you concerned that BlackRock, some say is just an arm of the government alongside of JP Morgan, might end up owning too much of Bitcoin or controlling too much of it? So I guess that's two questions in one.
Yeah, so I'm aware of a very concerted effort among some large Bitcoin holders who they said, you know, Larry Fink is the key to getting a lot of changes to happen on Wall Street. And that concerted effort was to sit down with him, talk to him, educate him, and see, could he understand where they were coming from? Now, these people happen to be, you know, kind of traditionally very successful finance people who happen to like Bitcoin. They weren't kind of your, you know, cypherpunk kind of traditional Bitcoiner. And so they were very successful in that, maybe we'll call it an intervention of, hey, look, we own a lot of this. We think that this is good. Here's why we like it. Here's what we think the risks are. Here's how we think the world's going to play out in the future. On top of what is an external, you know, kind of marketing campaign, maybe to Larry Fink, kind of an audience of one, there was also an internal effort. So there's a gentleman, Robbie Mitchnick, who is the head of digital assets at BlackRock. There's a couple other people internally. They really worked hard to do the work, right? When you work inside the company, you can't just like call up the big boss and say, hey, let's go to lunch. I got an idea. You got to kind of put together research. You got to put together an argument. You got to not only explain why is this asset going to be something that's going to be valuable in the future, but you also got to explain why is this good for our clients? Why is this good for our shareholders? How should we think about the risk? What is the compliance, right? All those things go into kind of forming that argument. And so I like to think that there's an external and an internal kind of intervention. And Larry Fink ultimately said, you know what? I do agree. I think that this is going to be a big thing. Him going on television talking about people buying Bitcoin as a flight to quality is a very big deal. You know, I'd like to think of there's different seasons to Bitcoin, and the season of Bitcoiners being important for Bitcoin in terms of the marketing of Bitcoin is over. It is now the torch been passed to the Larry Finks of the world. No matter how hard anyone in the Bitcoin community tries to market Bitcoin, they will always be less important now than Larry Fink simply just saying Bitcoin is good. And so understanding kind of who has that torch is important. Now, what is important is the Bitcoiners that end up actually trying to defend the ethos of Bitcoin. And that leads into the conversation of, can someone own too much of Bitcoin? Michael Saylor owns over 1%. The Winklevoss twins, they own at least 1%. BlackRock has 2%. You know, we very quickly can get to 10, 15% just on known people who own a lot of Bitcoin. Satoshi, over 800,000 Bitcoin, right? You just kind of go down the line. The beauty is that no matter how much Bitcoin you own, you do not control the network. You cannot manipulate it in a way that would be nefarious or malicious to anybody else. And so in a way that the US government was created, you know, there's kind of these three branches of the US government, and they serve as checks and balances on each other. The Bitcoin network has those same checks and balances. It was devised in a very similar way. The software developers, you have the miners, and then you've got the node operators. And so each one of those groups serves as a check or a balance on the other groups. And we saw during the block size wars where over 80% of all mining hash rate tried to make changes. And it was the node operators who were able to stand up and defend Bitcoin. And so while most people would like to see decentralized ownership on top of a decentralized computational network, I think we can find solace in the fact that BlackRock could own 10% of Bitcoin and they can't do anything different than you or I. And so I do think that that is, you know, kind of the beauty of what Satoshi created. What I wonder is if there is enough concentrated ownership, does the liquid supply, what is available for trading, become so little that we get more and more volatility over time? That is an unanswered question. Right now, we have seen volatility go down, but there is not too much imagination needed to find scenarios where actually volatility would go up. And it has to do with if BlackRock owns 5%, other people own, multiple percent, and they're just holding that supply on top of the individual Bitcoiners holding that supply. How many stocks have we seen float 1 or 2% of their total shares and they rip hundreds of percent? If that was to happen with Bitcoin in an asset where you can't issue more shares, you can't temper, kind of the enthusiasm, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff that could happen. And so these are all things to pay attention to. But the beauty is that no matter how much Bitcoin BlackRock and Larry Fink own, they don't get to use the network any differently than you and I. And I think that is really what we mean by some sort of decentralized financial system is no matter how wealthy you are, you get in line in the blocks just like everybody else.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.